Welcome to Booked, where two guys tell you about the books they're reading. I'm Livius Nedden.
And I'm Rob Olson. This is our first book review of 2020. And to mark that occasion, we'll be discussing the Craig Wallwork book, Bad People. Now, typically, the first thing that we would do is read a bio about the author. And immediately we're running into trouble because I tried to find one. I was on Amazon, and he has an Amazon author page, but there's no bio attached to it. I looked in the actual book itself, and there's no bio. I looked at his, he's got like a blog, and that hasn't been updated since 2014. So we don't have an author-provided bio for this dude. But the good news is we've known him forever.
I wonder, because, he's been on the podcast a couple of times. I can't imagine that we didn't have a bio for him at some point.
Oh, yeah. You're probably right. Like, we could look at the most recent time we had him on and use that. It didn't occur to me.
Hold on. I found one. It says, Craig Wallwork was in the booked anthology. That's from one of our previous reviews. Hold on, because now I'm curious.
Maybe he just doesn't like having an author bio. Like, he doesn't want people to know about him.
Maybe we should write a bio for him and just start uploading it online.
Hold on. I have the booked anthology in my hands right now.
Yeah, I was going to say I found one for him from The Sound of Loneliness.
Oh, I mean, feel free to...
Craig Wallwork lives in West Yorkshire, England. He is the author of the short story collection Quintessence of Dust and the novels To Die Upon a Kiss and The Sound of Loneliness. His fiction has appeared in various anthologies, journals, and magazines. He is the fiction editor at Menacing Hedge magazine. He is now the formerly
editor.
Managing editor, yes.
Yeah. That's exactly the bio from the booked anthology, which came out in 2013. So, in the meantime, other stuff has come out. He had that book called Gory Hole, which I think was a collection of a few short stories. Mm-hmm. And then Serious Moonlight, which he released with Amanda Gowan a couple years back.
Did you purposely skip over Revenge of the Zombie Pussy Eaters?
No.
All right.
That kicked off some fun stuff for us back in 2011.
That was our first Halloween episode.
Yeah.
And it's still like my favorite episode every year. I mean, by and large, some years are better than others, right? But that's the one I look forward to every year. So I guess we have Craig to thank for that.
Yeah. So he has, we reviewed him. He's been on for interviews. So we have a storied past with this gentleman. And today we are here to talk about that novel, Bad People, which Livius is going to tell you a little bit about.
3 missing children. Over the past 3 years, the quiet Yorkshire village of Stormer Hill has lost 3 of its children. No bodies were ever discovered, no evidence found, no witnesses. The writer, struggling to find inspiration for his new novel, celebrated crime author and ex-police officer Alex Palmer believes the story of the missing children could end his writer's block, but is he prepared for the story that's about to develop? The detective. Tom Nolan, a seasoned detective and loner involved in finding each missing child. Nolan is tasked with chaperoning Palmer and walking through each case. But as both men revisit the past and dig deeper, neither are prepared for the chilling discovery to why the children were taken. The Brethren, a secret cult, 2 men and a series of brutal and unimaginable murders spanning over 7 years with one intention, to show the world that death can be justified if it's for a greater good. Let's start with the synopsis. Yes, I did not read the synopsis, as I often don't do if I just know we want to read somebody's work. So the synopsis is pretty straight on. One thing that I find interesting, I guess, about this, and we'll get to this as we talk about the book, I felt like right from the top that Alex Palmer was the protagonist. But maybe about a third of the way in the book, I didn't necessarily feel like he was the protagonist. And now it makes sense because clearly they're both listed in the bio. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah.
Like I felt like it started off them as the protagonist. Then I felt like he kind of dropped off as the main character, and that it shifted a little bit to Nolan, the cop.
Yes, and the interesting thing. So, we've said this a million times. Typically, we don't read the synopsis before we read the book because we don't need to be sold on it. We've already made the choice to read it. I think I read the synopsis before I understood who the characters were, like when I was reading through the book. So it didn't necessarily like trigger to me anything when I was reading through the book. But I agree. I definitely felt like there was ambiguity to who the clear protagonist was. However, if you look at the listing on Amazon for this book, in parentheses it says Tom Nolan Book 1.
Interesting.
Yeah. So Amazon disambiguifies. I just made that word up.
Yeah.
Disambiguates who the protagonist is, but you make a very good point, because the book isn't beating you over the head with this is the clear main character of the story, and for reasons that are spoilery to talk about. I feel like it was actually very intentional and kind of well executed.
Yes, I certainly agree with that, but we should start at the beginning, right? So after a quick prologue, we're introduced to Alex Palmer, who, as it says in the synopsis, is a very successful crime writer, and he has made his way to Stormer Hill on the news of these missing children to kind of get that writer's look at what's going on and, around the town. And he's pretty specific about not wanting to write a book about these kids. But I mean, I guess if you're a crime writer, what better way to investigate your next book than to get involved in something like this? And he, through some connections that he has, is able to secure Tom Nolan, who's a detective, to kind of give him the lay of the land, so to speak. So that's how we're introduced to both of these characters. Alex is the outsider. Nolan is the cop that's essentially, a little standoffish about the whole thing. Here comes, this rich former cop turned author to pry into the lives of people in this small town who obviously are overcome with grief at having, recently lost a third youngster to mysterious circumstances.
And it's exacerbated by the fact that, like Livia said, this is the third child in the course of just about 4 years. And so as time goes on and these missing children's cases continue to not be solved, I think when the story starts, the third one had happened within the last 6 months or so, if I could be wrong about that. But the town's starting to lose faith. Well, is definitely losing faith in the police department, and obviously the police are feeling what's the word I'm looking for?
Defeated?
Maybe defeated a little bit. Like they're definitely they're feeling the effects of the continued failure. Like it's starting to weigh on them that it hurts them as bad as it does the town, but they're also to blame for not finding the kids because it's their job. So tensions are definitely just doing nothing but rising as Palmer arrives. And so not only does he have to get over the whole, this guy is trying to profit on our tragedy kind of thing, but it's stirring the pot more that he is arriving now when things continue. Nothing is happening, basically.
Subsequently, we're introduced to a character named Graham Slade. Graham's an interesting character. He's a little bit on the simpler side. He lives with his elderly mother. He has secured a job as a janitor at a local elementary school, or whatever they're called in England, school for young kids. And he has, a couple of things going on. He has a little bit of a mysterious past. We'll say that's how we're kind of introduced to him, with not a lot of background. But, there's some things happening. He also has some interactions with a creature character that may or may not be of this world. I don't think we want to talk too much about that, but let's just say that Graham... some decisions in his life are made based on conversations he has with another being.
Yeah. And so there's a couple other characters that are big enough to talk about. So Slade's mom, makes somewhat of an appearance, and she's kind of a grumpy old gypsy woman, I guess is like the uncouth way to say it. She's kind of like that. She's like a medium almost, right? She believes in all the crystals and
Yeah,
that kind of stuff.
You said gypsy and I said hippie, and I'm sure we both say them equally with the same amount of disdain. So I guess that's fair.
Let's say hipsy, and that way I don't have to apologize for using a derogatory word.
You're inventing all kinds of new words this episode. I love it.
And then you've got the boss of Tom Nolan, a man named Mark Coonan, who is, I don't understand like the ranking over there, but he's detective inspector, and Nolan is detective constable or something like that. But anyway, he's the boss. He's the guy that's in charge of these missing persons cases. He's like the point dude on it. But he's also he's kind of a by the book dude. So the handful of times he's really prominent in a scene, like they'll say, we want to do this, and he'll say, okay, we'll do this and this so that I can do this, and he's very by the book, which is kind of, I don't know. It's interesting to see, because like a lot of people like to write the type of cop that's just like, he'll break the law to enforce the law. So,
yep. I wanna sidetrack us for a minute, because you mentioned the little bit of like confusion that you had around the rank and stuff. Yeah. One of the things that I really liked about this book, but I will caution that this is also perhaps a pitfall, is there's a genuineness in my reading a book that takes place in the UK where some of the language is a little bit harder to understand. And I think that what you're saying there is a good example of that. Like, it lends a little bit of more authenticity to me, because very clearly it's in England, right? Like, the names of the town are brought up a lot. You know what I mean? And it has a very, I don't want to say small village, but a smaller town feel to it. And I think that not just whatever weird rankings they use for the police system there, but some of the general language in there, I'm not sure, how do I say this? There were times where I was like, kind of wonder what that means. And yeah, I don't know if someone in England would have picked up on all of that and understood all of it, and I'm just a little bit left out, but I actually enjoyed that. I thought it lent a little something to the story.
Yeah, and to give an example of what Livy's talking about, if there's a policy or like a specific type of paperwork that's involved, it's just referred to as that policy or paperwork. It's not explained. So like, like I got a ticket for jaywalking. It would be, with no explanation of what jaywalking was, is kind of, that's my dumb American example, but which is kind of nice. But they also refer to the Met, which I think is like the Metropolitan Police, like the London Police. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, nice authenticity to it, not trying to dumb it down for an American audience.
Yeah. I like, this is just an example that I highlight. It says, well, that Levy kid, his mother used to mollycoddle him to an inch of his life. And I'm like, this is fucking perfect. I mean, I get the general idea, but I'm like, I love this word, mollycoddle. Like, this needed to be in the book. Now, to anybody who's in England, it's probably like, we use that fucking term all the time. These guys are idiots. Yeah, maybe. I don't know if you guys jaywalk, though, as Rob so eloquently mentioned just a moment ago. So that's, yeah. I like that a lot, though, and I'm glad you brought that up. I kind of had a note to talk about it later on, but I thought that was a good time to break in.
Cool. Back to the story a little bit. Like, after the general setup that we gave you, I want to say that from a narrative perspective, it is a third person narrative. We do see from the perspective of different characters. So some chapters or parts of chapters we're following what's going on with Alex Palmer. Other parts of chapters or full chapters, we see what's going on with Tom Nolan. And it's not necessarily restricted to those two. We get characters' perspectives from a lot of people, not all of them, but like a lot of the characters. And so as the book goes on, we are following the police investigation, but also Alex Palmer's experience with going to this small town and trying to use what he learns about these crimes to inform the book that he's trying to write.
Yeah, I mean, I'm willing to go just a step further into plot. So, as Rob said, we kind of follow these people, and as they come closer to revelations, I guess is a good way to say it, there's another abduction, and that really kicks everything kind of into high gear. So structurally, not a ton different from your missing kids, narrative, I think, right? That's kind of the thing. There's always a number, and then there's one, it's like urgent, because this one is fresh.
Yeah, it kicks off the second act, kind of.
Yeah. So, the book follows a similar structure to that, but this one's really all about the characters and kind of the whodunit. Not that it's necessarily, written like a mystery, but I think, its strength and what differentiates it is in you've got an author, you've got a detective, you've got this weird guy, Slade, running around, you know what I mean? And like his perspective on things and how it all comes together.
So to address the cult kind of brethren thing that was mentioned in the synopsis, there's some weird stuff going on, and so how that manifests in the story, aside from every now and then the Alex Palmer character will like think he sees someone and maybe they're not actually there early on, and then we see what that means later on. Graham Slade specifically encounters some pretty macabre stuff when he goes to work at the school. He finds a pig that's cut open, and it's got a tattoo on it that's got some words from like a, I don't know, a poem or whatever. So there's some culty kind of weird stuff that does have a connection to what's going on with these missing people. So there's a quality to the book of how does this fit in? What is the goal of whoever's doing this weird, freaky shit? So it's not just your straight crime procedural. Well, I guess, I mean, like, it feels like one of those, like a mini series you'd watch on Netflix or something that's like, could it be like the actual devil is here, or is it just someone acting really fucked up? Like that kind of thing. I might be a little off on that.
I think so Craig explains it, and this is from some emails with him and I believe some stuff he's posted on social media, that it is a crime story that kind of leans into the horror genre, and I think that's a pretty fair way to address this. At its heart, it's a crime book. Yep. But it is not, I'm trying, like the movie Snatch, which is also a crime story. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? This definitely has a much darker tone to it than your average crime book.
Yeah. So I don't know how much farther we can go on plot, just because it gets pretty spoilery after this.
Yep. I will say that we could talk maybe a little bit about characters. One thing I like about Alex Palmer, who, like I said, at least initially is almost presented like this is the guy you're going to spend all your time with and root for in the book. I really like that the peak we get at him is that he's not typically that character, right? So the author stumbling onto a crime thing, right, is, the white knight, but he's not like the best person. Like some of his insights into his past don't indicate that he's like he's a flawed character.
For sure. And I would say that probably what I think is a bigger strength of this book is that Wallwork does a very good job of slowly revealing the character might not be, the normal guy we're expecting, like you said. Mm-hmm. It's not revealed right away, but as the book goes on, you might, it's slowly revealed that, oh, I might have read this character wrong. There might be something else, you might not be like the shining armor kind of guy.
Yeah, and in reference to what I said, it's like backstory for him, and you're thinking to yourself like, oh, this isn't all that protagonisty, right? And what I'm talking about is he kind of reflects on like some of his like past relationships and stuff. Yeah. Yeah. And again, it lent a genuine feel. Like we see the guy, he's successful, he's obviously a talented writer, right? Like he's a pretty good guy. He's not stepping on any toes, but then you're like, oh, he does have some issues with people people and relationships. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's a refreshing kind of look at it. He's not the sad widower that never found love. You know what I mean? Like
Yep.
it was just, yeah. So it wasn't very tropey. And I'll say similar thing for the detective, who's the other kind of clear protagonist in the story, is that he's, he's like kind of overweight. He's not whatever, Brad Pitt.
He's pretty unremarkable.
Yeah. So I like what he did there. And then Slade, we talk about Graham Slade a little bit. He's a little slow. I think Rob simple-minded as the description in our notes, and that's exactly it. You know what I mean? He's simple-minded. He's got these quirks. He's got this mother, this hipsy mother. Is that what we decided? So there's a lot of good. There's a lot of good character stuff going on here. Even Coonan, the boss, the boss cop, who isn't, how do I say this? There's not a lot of page time for that guy, but even he's got some shit that, like, kind of grounds him in reality more than you expect when these characters could be very tropey.
Yeah. This book definitely does not suffer from having predictable characters. I think everybody has somewhat of an arc, or at least he does a good enough job of shifting his representation of different characters so as to keep the mystery going. And like you get a simple-minded character in a town where kids go missing. What's your first thought? So the fact that
Rob, I guess if we're stereotyping, your first thought would be it's the simple-minded school janitor.
Well, no, my first thought is the town is going to think it's the simple-minded school janitor.
Oh, all right.
I see how it escaped from that one.
You're not stereotyping janitor. You're stereotyping the town that's going to think that. I gotcha. Never mind.
So yeah, he does a great job of evolving the characterization, I guess is the best way to put it. But in service of the story, I think that the way that the characters, your impression of them, grows, makes the story more believable and more interesting, and in general just kind of boosts all of it. It's one of the strengths of the book for sure. Indeed.
A little bit about the writing. Wallwork's a talented writer and storyteller. There's not a ton I think that we need to say there, except that it's well written, and it's not it's sparse enough. So it's a short book, right? What was the final page count on the printed version? Do you know offhand?
Amazon's got it at like 262.
Yeah, so it's not a terribly long book, but it flows really well. It's written in bite-sized chapters. I believe there's 42 chapters, maybe.
Yep, 43.
Yeah, so you're looking at an average of like 6 pages per chapter, so it moves pretty quickly in that kind of perspective shift that typically happens between chapters.
And to that point, a friend of the podcast, Jesse Lawrence, texted and asked how the book was so far. I'll read some of what I texted back because I think it's definitely relevant to what we're talking about here. About the language that he uses and just the style of writing, like Livius was saying, I said he writes in a way that has mass market appeal, but with his signature kind of flourishes. And again, remember, we've read, multiple books by Craig already. He can be poetic in descriptions without coming off as flashy or purple or indulgent. It's clear his writing has made a big step up, from earlier books. And I know this sounds a little bit like a wrap up, but just, this is me talking to friends about this guy. So, my remarks to Jesse are basically kind of marveling at the fact that, like, while he keeps the language very accessible to everybody, he manages to make it, trying to think of the best way to say it, but uniquely almost poetic in certain times, not all the time. And I think that's where it's good. Like there's, a serviceable narrative that he'll slip in just like a mind-blowing description of something, at a normal pace, so that it's like a step above like your average kind of like crime novel, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. Absolutely. And I fully agree with you on what, this is for certain mass market appeal, but Britt did a great hire than that is really how I thought about it. I know I messaged Rob and said, this one has really wide appeal Like, it's definitely, I don't want to say mass market. Like, I know that's the term we use, but I feel like people may take that as derogatory. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But that's it. It's got an air. It's not wildly out there. It's accessible. It's written in a way where it's not, overly wordy, but it's still written well. Like, it really hits all the marks for something you'd find on the shelf at Borders or in the, airport bookstore or,
Hopefully not at Borders.
Oh yeah, they went out of business, did they? Yeah. Let's see, Barnes and Noble. So much time I spend in bookstores. Yeah. I'm gonna head down to the Borders and see if I can get me a Wallwork out of there.
Good Lord. So yeah, and yeah, when I said mass market, as Livius kind of elaborated, I definitely mean like how big of an audience does this person have the ability to reach a mass market? You want to wrap this up?
Yeah, I'm going to take a minute and say that a couple of things before we get to wrap-ups. I do want to say we have an entirely new rating system, which is completely and entirely due to Rob. And I say that in case people hate it, too, so that I could be like, well, I told you whose fucking idea this was, right? So we'll get to that in a moment. The other thing, I just want to say that I said on the last episode that I need to be harder on books this year. So I want to preface any wrap-up or rating with the fact that I'm going to be very stingy with the highest rewards for ratings this year. Not implying that this book is not going to get a high reward. I just want to remind the listeners and myself that it's a new year and it's a new Livius. And I will not give like 6 5-star reviews in a row or whatever I saw when you put it on that spreadsheet for me. And I was like, Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
So the bar has moved higher, but we're not going to spend a lot of time talking about the new review system. We do have a video over on YouTube. It's relatively short. We suggest you pop over there and check it out so you can understand the reasoning behind the new review system and really how it works. So head over to youtube.com, Booked Podcast. If you search for that, if you're not already a subscriber, please subscribe. We promise there will be more video content coming this year. Hit the like button and the notification bell and make a comment and do all that stuff annoying YouTubers ask you to do, because we'd really like to move not away from doing this, but moving into doing some video stuff. So if you could do that, that'd be great. I actually have some really fun ideas for videos. I just have to get around to figuring how to do video.
And so you go into your camera app on your phone, and I don't know how it works on the Androids, but
here's that. Wait.
It's
Hold
the
on,
one
slow
that
down.
looks like,
you're going too fast.
It's a little picture of a camera.
Got it. Now, see, every time I do this, it's just a bunch of pictures of me doing. Never mind. I'll figure this out on my own.
It's going to be a bumpy ride, guys. But yeah, absolutely. There's going to be more content for YouTube as we go through 2020. Because honestly, we just felt like, hey, let's just do more work. Why not just do more stuff? Right? Isn't that
I was like, Rob, how are you with video editing?
Well, yeah, and yeah. Livius mentioned having a DSLR camera, and I was like, whoa. You gonna get one of those weird umbrellas that's got a light inside of it next?
So little known fact, when we do the Facebook Lives, I'm actually using one of those lamps, but without an umbrella.
Oh, all right. You should.
It's actually a photography lamp, just running like just bulbs, not like a flash, but just running live, whatever they're called, hot bulbs or something. I don't know. At any rate, whatever.
Hot bulbs.
Listen, tell folks a little bit about the new rating system.
Okay. We're not going to go into a whole thing here, but I'll tell you a little about the inspiration for the rating system. We've been basically doing this already, but kind of from scratch every episode, because the things that we've always talked about, plot and, the narrative and the pace of the book and stuff, that's what we're rating. We're just kind of breaking it out to give a more comprehensive understanding of why we thought, how we did about the book. So we will elaborate on that in the video over in YouTube. But that's why we did it. It's just more of a guideline, and maybe it gives us the idea to have more consistency, but also for you, the listener, hopefully you get a better understanding of what we thought did and did not work of the book instead of just trying to, you know, read the tea leaves of all that shit we said in one big block. The biggest
8 years in. 8 years in, and I'm finding out that Rob was using some kind of system and not just his gut for giving number reviews to books. And here I am. I'm like, nah, I feel like 4.5 stars today. What the fuck?
Yes, exactly. I was holding out on you. Biggest change you're going to notice is that we are not going on a 5-star system anymore. This score is going to be out of 10. In the episodes that you hear, probably it's not going to sound like us talking about a bunch of different categories and how we rate each one of them. We're probably going to do a general summary using some of those keywords, like, hey, I really thought the pace of this book was, a strong point of it. But not necessarily saying, all right, my audience score was 4, like that kind of thing. We're going to try and keep it conversational, but using the score for ourselves to give a more comprehensive understanding of what we thought of the book.
For sure. That's all I had to add to that. You did a wonderful job.
You want me to start with my wrap up?
Yes, please do.
All right. This is me rubbing my hands because I'm excited about this. It's been a little bit since we had a chunky Wallwork story. Back in 2017, Sirius Moonlight was a kind of a shorty, kind of a quick story. So we haven't had a novel from his in several years. I've always enjoyed his style of writing. I thought he had a very approachable method of storytelling. So I was excited to see what his latest thing was. As I alluded to maybe when I was talking about my texts with Jesse Lawrence, I feel like his writing style has absolutely grown. I feel like he's whatever happened, since his last novel that we reviewed, there's definitely some maturity to the way that he writes. This particular story, I really enjoyed the character aspect of the book. I think that we talked a lot about the characters in our conversation earlier. I think that one of the strong points of the book is the characters and how they evolve as the book goes on, and how it affects our perspective of who they are and what they mean to the story. Absolutely one of the strongest parts of the book, along with the fact that the narrative was just very interesting. Like the fact that we got to see things from different people's perspectives, but we're still not 100% sure of what was going on, even up to close to the very end. Really great. The end of the story was, we didn't really mention it before, but pretty wild. And it's funny because somewhere I read I think in Wallwork, it might be the end of the book, he had some acknowledgments and comments, and he mentioned that this book was a thriller. And that's where I was a little bit confused, because the pace of the book doesn't read like a thriller to me. So I was a little bit thrown off by that, because one of the things I thought was, it feels like I'm taking a leisurely pace through this book. It's not something that's just like a page turner. It's not your 2 or 3 page, Patterson chapter kind of thing. So it didn't feel fast paced. It didn't feel like a page turner, but it didn't take me a long time to read it either. So I think maybe it was just me getting very engrossed in the story. But pace was a little bit of a question mark for me, because, I didn't necessarily feel like it was like a super fast paced book. All that being said, on our brand new shiny, it's still got the plastic on it we have to pull off, 10 star rating, I'm giving this book 8.75 stars.
All right. I by and large agree with everything that Rob said. So I'll focus on a couple of things that I like that maybe he didn't touch on, or I think maybe just need additional commentary. So wide audience for sure. And part of the scoring system, without getting too far into it, is this kind of book that anybody could pick up and enjoy. So yes, I think it is really macabre in places and really foul. So for me, that's fine. I know there's probably a little cross section of the population that needs to stay away, from that kind of stuff, that it's really just not for them. And then language. I love the way he writes. Like I said, it gave, and I know he's he lives in England, like, so it's authentic for him. Like he could write a cookbook recipe, right? And it would probably have the same kind of sound and feel to it. But I really like that. It really grounds the book, as it didn't take place in your neighborhood. Like, it has a locale. And for me, being, the dumb American, as Rob mentioned earlier, it really lends an authenticity to the locale of the story. I agree with Rob on pace. I didn't think it was too fast. I thought it was kind of just right. One of the issues, maybe, and I don't even know if it's an issue, one of the things about writing a multi-perspective book is that pace can feel a little weird, because sometimes you have to see what all three people are doing, or four people, or however many, at the same time. So if you had a first person narrative, that person would be going the whole time, right? So you'd feel like the story's moving at a certain pace. When you introduce multiple viewpoints, not always, but in that critical climax of the book, let's say, you may have to show 2 or 3 or 4 different people's events. So the events of the book take place over the course of half an hour, but you have to spend 2 hours on it, because you have to look at 4 different viewpoints. So, like I said, Rob's right. I liked, the plot was good. The narrative was great. I came in, and now this is all done mathematically, so you're going to hear some weird things, because we actually put in scores for 8 different categories. 8.5, which brings the overall average, if Rob's math is correct, 8.63 for this book out of 10.
I feel like that's pretty good, right?
Well, I mean, let's really break it down. If it was a 5-point system, that would be 4.32, so almost 4.5 stars.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, if we kind of...
Well, and it's the highest score we've given on a 10-point scale so far. So
yeah.
He's got that.
There you go.
This is a terrible job.
I mean, look, like I said, it's always tough as being the first on something. So I said, I'm going to really look at these goddamn ratings I'm giving these books. I'm giving away too many 5s, right? So there's that. Sorry, Craig. And then, there's a whole new system we have to work through. So we'll see. The nice thing, the best thing about this is, and not necessarily move quickly away from Craig's book, but I love the spreadsheet that Rob set up for this, because we'll just be able to click through and look at different scores for these different categories. Watch the video. Go watch the video. That's all I'm saying. Go subscribe. YouTube.com/book podcast, I think, maybe.
Yeah, probably. One of us could verify that. It's this is one of those things that I feel like so looking back, we just did a decade review, so I'm not going to get too retrospective in this, but looking back at 2017, I feel like we did the absolute bare minimum, and we've just been trying to bounce back from that since. And so getting some big name authors to interview and doing some other stuff, and I feel just pretty charged up for 2020. So giving ourselves a better rating system and trying to do, I don't know, interesting new stuff, I feel like is going to be the theme of 2020. It's a new decade. Yeah. So besides that, we will be at some point having a discussion amongst ourselves to try and revamp and update our Patreon. Not only because the video on there is 5 years old now and not necessarily relevant to what we're doing in the modern day, but also because things change. We want to see what we can do to kind of liven things up, and we always want to bring good quality stuff to the listeners and the supporters on Patreon. And so, every now and then, why not just shake it up and try something different?
Yep. So if you're a Patreon supporter, thank you for your continued support. It means the world to us. If you're not, what are you waiting for? Patreon.com/booked. $1 a month. That's all we're asking for. We're actually asking for like $28 a month, but we'll settle
I mean,
for
yeah.
$1 a month, which is really, when you think about from a negotiation standpoint how this works, if I said, 28 and someone said 1, then I'd have to say like 20 and they'd probably have to say like 5. So really, we're just go with the buck, man. Go with the buck.
See,
go with
and
what you can afford.
this is exactly why we're going to have a conversation, because Livius knows, I mentioned before, what if we just asked for $2?
Yeah. I mean,
that would be double the money immediately.
Exactly. And here's what I'll tell you. If you guys want to prove me wrong, absolutely go and either change your donation to $2 if you're only doing $1, or just do $2 and you will prove Livius wrong. And really, what better feeling is there in the world than proving me wrong?
That's why I'm still a part of this podcast, just like continuing opportunities to prove you wrong.
I know. Sometimes I purposely say things that are wrong so Rob can prove me wrong, so he'll stick around. It's an ugly, abusive relationship we're in.
It's so weird. What is that codependency kind of thing going on?
Yep. Yeah, something like that.
Back to Craig's book. We're recording this on the 14th of January. The release date for this book is the 17th of January on Amazon and probably all the other places you can buy books at. So by the time you're listening to this, most likely the book will be available, and not for a ton of money. So I think you should absolutely buy it, read it, rate it, all that stuff.
For sure. We want to thank Craig for getting us a review copy. So we appreciate that. So we get this out in a timely fashion for you guys. Next week, this is going to be our 3rd episode of 2020. And we're taking a week off. Interlude, baby. Interlude. Rob and I have a lot of podcast stuff to do. So we've decided to leave ourselves a little bit of room. What I will say, it's not going to be one of those interludes where we have nothing to talk about. I feel like we have the content and the discussion material to do an interlude right now, but we're not going to do that because we have some stuff to do for YouTube, for Patreon. And, I don't know. Maybe Rob and I can get a bite to eat or something. We'll see.
I didn't even thought, I'll probably be hungry.
Yeah.
There you go.
So Rob and I will have one of those rare in-person booked meetings tomorrow. Basically, the catalyst for that, although we have other stuff we need to do, is the mugs are here. 2019 booked podcast Patreon mugs. We're going to have a packaging party at Casa del Rob tomorrow night. And then, like I said, some other podcast-related stuff we're going to be handling. So I'm excited about that.
Yeah, we could do the first interlude from the McDonald's play area. We could do that.
Nice. Yeah, we could. We could. Videos from Rob's car coming up.
Me coming
soon.
Down a slide and shit.
Dude, we get thrown out so fast. That's
true.
the problem.
They're like,
That's
why
the
did
problem.
the biggest guy in town decide to go down this slide? Yeah.
Yeah. So, at any rate, that's what we've got for this week. I hope you enjoyed our first review of 2020. Many more to come, probably like 20 or so this year.
Oh my God. Yeah.
At
So
least.
you've got some work to do, listeners. You got to go subscribe to our YouTube. You got to go sign up for $2 on the Patreon. And then you got to come back soon to check out an interlude where we have, me and Livia started sending each other articles about stuff, and they're just interesting. So we'll have some good conversation next week. Until then, I'm Rob Olson.
And I'm Livius Ned, and keep reading. There's no way they're going to give us $2, bro.